Hello, everyone. Right, week 6 and the fifth week of us painting. Now, tonight we're going to go and do some of the horns and spikes. I've done a test already, and they're fairly straightforward. But what I'm also going to do is, as we had seen on, I posted after last week's, because I'd done one wing already and then had the other wing to do, and because I'm in the process of balancing them out, and I think I discussed with Malcolm definitely we talked about the veins, and there's the big molded veins in here, and then there are, and it just didn't look right to me. It's still, Malcolm mentioned about possibly sculpting or adding veins to it. What I tried to do initially was to paint 3D effect veins on it by using just the dark color I used, which I think was the Cavalry Brown, maybe. You'd have to double check from that, and the Pale Flesh, which I was using for the lightest tone. Just to, I tested that on the ends of some of the ones that existed. So if you end up looking at reference using, you can see probably. Let's see if I can point to that. Those two, where are we gone? These two veins here don't exist. So I painted a shadow at the bottom and then at the top. So just to add a bit of further continuity, because these ones up here are a bit thick and huge compared to these finer detailed ones.
Okay.
But then I also came up with the idea of just painting the dark color only as little capillary veins coming out from these center wing portions, or the finger portions, and you can see most of them are just almost Y shapes coming away. And then I used blue, which was kind of a mix between, I think it was the Behir Breath and the darker Displaced Beast, and just used that thin and less of it to do some little tiny blue veins in there as well. Just to,
yeah.
When you look at it overall, you don't see it, but when you give it that little bit of extra attention, you can see these extra little veins in there, which just add a bit of interest to it, and maybe give it a little bit more life, potentially, however you want to interpret that.
Looks nice.
So I was quite pleased with the way that came out. And then, obviously, what I didn't do in the session was to go back over with the green, and do the highlights. And there's nothing different to how I did those to how I'd done the skin. So it's the same colours as you would go back and reference back to how I did the skin. What I did do in places is use little brush strokes. You can see just going across. I didn't kind of blend it perfectly. I made it a little bit looking slightly textured by just doing fine lines across. Same, you can see there on. There you go.
Oh yeah.
On the wing bit there, just to add. That's just smooth in the actual model, but it adds a bit of texture and wear. Makes them look a bit old and cruddy, so to speak. So you can see how I've kind of, again, the light's coming down from the top, so I've got the brightest bits right at the top, and it kind of accentuates those wing portions, or that bit there. So that was the intention. And as we turn them around again, we can now see the horn. Yeah, how I've approached the horns and the spikes. So I've decided to do the horns on his head and the spikes on his back, all very similar, all the same kind of look. I haven't done yet the ones on the top of the wings, which will be the same. it boils down to it. There's not that many of them, really. It feels like it when you're painting everything else, but in reality, there's not that many. I'm probably going to do the same for his toenails, but at the moment, I'm not going to paint his toenails because there will be. I won't do that till after I've done the groundwork because that will just get onto his toes. So that will be the kind of probably the last thing I do potentially.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of had with the horns. I'm doing nothing fancy whatsoever. It's almost generic fantasy horn painting, which is kind of dark at the bottom, closer to the body, and getting paler to the top. Slightly streaked, you can see, with some little lines just to add a bit of interest as it goes into his skull. And the same is true for those ones on his back. So they're very, very straightforward to do. Don't use many colours.
Okay.
There's no white in there at all. So the colours I used for that are, the initial coat was just a beige colour, or the beige colour from that set. It wasn't until about 5 minutes before I turned on the camera that I discovered there is a bone white in here, but I forgot all about that, so I've used beige, and I'm going to carry on using beige. So I'll get some of that out on the palette.
Is it going to be his same colour for his teeth?
I can't remember what I think I'd already put his teeth in, so to speak. I can't remember what I did for that. I'd have to go back and have a look, but it probably is. It probably is. I don't. These things all kind of are much of a muchness, really.
Okay. So you put the teeth in with using the same colour. Was it just dab the paint in, and then did you put any darker colours in there, or same as with the?
I think we did that. I think I might have done a little. What do you call it? A thin bit of either cavalry brown or the beige red. Oh, no, the what colour was that? Yeah, beige red. Thinned that down, and then did probably. I did end up with we're going to go to this off-white colour eventually. So I always start with a tone lighter or darker than I'm planning to end up being.
Okay. So it's horns today. Do you think we'll get to any of the weapons or the braces? Or
well, what I'm hoping to do is that these horns might even get them done fairly quickly. I'd like to get to the gloves and deal with those, and if there is time, to begin on some of the metallics, but depends how quickly the rest of that go. Sometimes dealing with the bigger areas can be quicker than dealing with the little bits.
Okay.
So I'm going to just quickly thin my beige, probably 50-50 water paintbrush, water paint, and I'm just going to very quickly and very simply, you can see it's going to take a couple of coats to get a nice coverage. When I'm painting something like this, I'm kind of painting up the length of the horn from the bottom so that I can get a sharper edge at the bottom and then sort of drag the paint up to the top.
It looks like slightly thicker paint. Is that sort of base colour? Oh, I guess it would be base colour thickness, wouldn't it?
Yeah. This is just to get something on there. And one thing about you can see already with the bits I've done, that kind of makes the skin pop a bit more as well. You know, it makes the green look better because we.
That brush looks like it's got a bit of a tuft to it.
It has. This is the. This is the prismatic paintbrush. So this isn't a bad brush actually, compared to the other two which came with the sets.
Mhm.
This is the one that came with the model, I think, isn't it? Or...
Yeah, I think so. So you'd go around and do all of them this colour first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you're doing, it'll probably take, it's a careful bit of painting this, because you're trying not to go over anything you've already painted. You don't want to do that if you can help it.
And if you did make a mistake and just touch the green there, you just have to
yeah, what you'll notice here is
green.
I'm not quite, if I can help it, not going quite up to the green flesh. So there is a dark base primer line of black around most of those, which you can see on these other ones that I've done already. It almost saves you having to go and line it, because it's kind of nice to separate it. Yeah, it adds a bit of separation between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a black primer can be handy. So yeah, let's just see if I can get these done. Some awkward locations to some of these, but twisting the model round appropriately. Hopefully you can get to them without getting paint on anything else. Sorry.
I don't know if you saw any other modelers mess this week. Anyone's progress?
I can't remember.
A couple went up that I saw. Very good.
There has been some really impressive stuff I've seen.
Yeah.
You can, because this takes a little while, something like this big horn here is already dry, so that can already get a second coat on it. Although I still haven't painted them all, just to illustrate how you can approach it. At the moment, I'm still avoiding doing these two because I'm finding I'm using those ones as finger supports to stop my hand shaking when I'm painting some of these other bits. But yeah, having that contrast of the white against the green, or the bone, I should say, against the green is quite good.
Yeah. Does break it up nicely.
Yeah, it's like with any miniature, you always have those big areas of base color, which are, or the main color, which can actually be quite boring, be it an olive drab uniform or a field grey uniform. And it's not until you add those extra little bits to it that they kind of come alive a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to those bits where you start adding the detail in, which can be a little bit more laborious than you might like, but they are the bits that make them come alive. So, and these are very awkward locations.
Maybe you should have done those ones off camera.
There's that one there. I nearly almost didn't see that one, but almost like a baby wing location. Right.
He got horns on the ends of his. No.
Cheeks.
He's got horns. No. At the top of his wings, he has, doesn't he?
Yeah. Like I say, I'm using those as supports, and I'll only wipe the paint off at the moment, so I might do them last. But yes, they are. I did kind of think, could I do them a different colour? But I could argue that the horns coming out of his body, spikes coming out of his body, could be one colour, and then these could be the same colour as his, because he's got somewhere under his knuckles here there are some fingernails, and then his toenails. They could all be similar. They don't. But how different do I do them compared to a horn? I haven't decided, but I'll probably do them similar. Ooh, that did go a little bit too far potentially. So yeah.
And when you say that you're just doing the horns in a very simple way, is there a complicated way, or?
Well, you could make them all sort of really monstrously or little detailed wiggles and things, but you could, with anything, you could paint details, little striations on them, but and overcomplicate them potentially. But yeah, so right, okay. So I've kind of done a base coat on those. So the next thing I'm going to use is the sepia wash, and if we, so I'm going to use the sepia wash. I'm going to thin that slightly, even though it's already a wash.
Have we used a wash so far? We used an ink.
Yeah, yeah, we've used some. I've used them as inks. Well, I think we had this discussion last time, didn't we, about what's the difference between a wash and an ink? And a wash to me is a thin paint, and it's a convenient pre-thinned paint. A lot of my paint is applied as a controlled wash or a glaze, and I'm going to do that here now. Even though I could probably argue I could do another coat potentially, but I'm trying to get stuff done. So with my sepia wash that I have thinned a little bit, I'm from about you can see here that I've seen it a little bit more.
Third down. Does it start?
Yeah, and I'm going to paint down. I'm going to paint. If you remember what we've discussed before about where bulk of the paint will be removed from the brush, because I want a transition from light to dark. But a third down, I'm going to trying to look at this on the camera, and I'm about a centimetre away from the actual model. Okay, right, here we go. So I'm going to paint. I'm painting downwards, so the paint is mostly being deposited at the base, and it's kind of puddling almost there and pooling, which is great because that's kind of what we want. But I'm not applying it with lots of paint on my brush. As a wash might imply, I'm applying it as a paint.
I know. Is it thinner as well? Have you thinned it down?
I have thinned it down a bit because I want to make sure I don't overdo it. So that bit at the top where it's going from the lighter portion doesn't look stark. Isn't if I had, I can always build that up. I can always add more paint going in that direction. And I then go and do the same on all these other bits. Not so much room to play, as it were. So I'm kind of doing it on the lower portion, but still trying to get the brush to go down towards the skin itself, so that the top isn't getting any sepia on it. And although it's not really a shadow effect, I'm still doing it mostly on the lower half of these. So can go back up here because you can see the difference between those two.
Yeah.
But you can just keep going back and doing. Yeah, that's the trouble with doing one at a time, and then trying to reproduce it isn't always that easy. But I wanted to have one I could show you today. So again, I'm going to.
Will they be identical?
They don't have to be identical.
Hmm.
I mean, let's see, I can even paint the back of one of those. But yeah, so the key is painting any of these shapes down towards the green skin, so that we're getting this only at the base, or mostly at the base.
So you're not even touching the top of the horns at all?
No.
No.
Nope. And using it thin to start off with, and going back to add more to the base as they dry, so that you can, intensify that darker effect at the bottom.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah, that's
two are
good.
starting to look closer.
Yeah.
And similar. Because I've now gotten close to a similar stage, I can go back and do both. They'll start looking more uniform if I'm doing them both together.
So I guess when we were talking about more detail in them, I guess you could put darker streaks in and things like that.
Yeah.
Couldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look back at classic old Games Workshop stuff from the 80s and 90s, they might have put a little black streak going up, little wiggles coming up. So, if we go and find examples of horns and the way people paint these things, you can find all different ways of making them look interesting. But now I could go back and I could reinforce those left, right. Keep doing it darker and darker and darker towards the base. I could, although I haven't, I could get the umber wash, which is a bit of a darker brown, and go use that even closer to the skin to make it darker. But I don't think it needs it. But what I'm going to do now is use the off-white, which is, we'll see it on the palette in a second. You'll see how much lighter that is compared to the beige. And I'm going to thin that slightly. I always rarely use anything straight from the pot. And I'm doing it in reverse mode compared to the sepia. I'm just going to paint it going up to the top.
So it's thicker at the top.
So it's lighter at the top. So it's coming off with brush at the top. That's probably too thick at this point in time, but and then on the
So are you planning on painting the top half ones? So the top ones are more lighter than the ones at the bottom, or are you going to paint every single one the same?
I'll go through each of these, and these ones I've done before. These have got some a little bit more tough.
There's a theory, isn't there, when you put a lighter colour around the head of a miniature where you want the eye to go, and then generally is darker at the base.
Yeah. So although I'm going to do, I'm doing these other ones. Because these are on the side and sticking outwards, I'm going to paint a light colour, bone colour, off-white, on the upper side of these, mostly. So So we are creating that kind of. Some of it's just the natural bone color of this thing piercing the skin, but there's also sort of like a catchlight from the light from above.
Yeah, they really do stand out.
Yeah, this is although there's no pure white in it, because of the greenness and everything, they do kind of jump out still. They do look quite bright and vibrant, even though it's not pure white. We have got some pure white. That would probably look a little bit too much and a bit garish.
Right.
So sometimes with miniatures like this, less is more. I do rarely use white in its purest form on a model. Ooh, there's some lovely. I can see a lovely mould line. I didn't quite get off that, but there you go.
That's a good job it's out of focus.
Yeah.
It is great.
And if you feel you go a bit too far on this light stuff, you can always go back with a sepia and
so that black line that you were leaving at the bottom, just to make sure that you give you a gap. Were you going over with the sepia over that black at the very base?
The sepia is thin enough and wash enough kind of thing that if any did go over it, you'd still see the black through it, which kind of shows how a paint can behave depending on the colour that's underneath it. So we're putting the sepia over top of the beige, which is pale, which allows the beige to kind of shine through the sepia wash. Mm-hmm. But the black is too dark to let that be seen. So that's why if you thin it correctly, you'll get that kind of effect, or you won't. It won't compromise that black. So that's the nature of the thin paint kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and add a little bit more. Go back to my sepia and do a little bit more down the bases of some of these. I haven't done it particularly neat on all of them.
I guess you can go back and refine it all, can't you?
Yeah.
At any stage.
And another thing I did, which I had as well. Yeah, if you find that your some of those borders between the bone and the green get a bit lost somewhere down the line through overpainting with the bone colour. Good old black brown, I think I said at the beginning, it's probably one of my favourite colours. So that's the black brown, and I can do that with just a little bit, maybe even add a bit of sepia to it, to use a sepia wash to thin it rather than water. No reason, I just thought I'd try that. And then very carefully go to the base of those bits again and just mark those edges.
Oh, okay. Just to clean them up a bit.
Clean them up a bit, yeah.
And I guess you could use that as well as your, putting the extra darker lines in, like we were talking about.
Yeah. So you can make, you've got more room to muck around on the bone coming out of his head compared to the rest of him. So you could do. Let's see now. Let's do some improvisation now. Where are we? Some little paint some little dots maybe just to almost like those bits on his stomach, really. Not exactly liver spots as such, but just blemishes in the growth pattern of this dude's horns.
Yeah.
With no logic to it. It just adds a bit more interest to see and look at when you're looking at it, or when somebody comes in, and they go, "Oh, what's going on there?" And oh, look at that! Look at those little things there. And you can create your own story when looking at it in your head about what it's all about, why it's there. So here you go. Look. So that just makes it look a bit different.
Yeah.
You could do that on all the other ones, but yeah, it's that makes it kind of cool, doesn't it? I haven't, like I say, I could now do the. Let me just see how quickly I can do this. So let's do a quick in the last couple of minutes. Well, there you go. Let's see if I can, because I think this will really pop. I use that word a lot. Pop. It's a miniature painter's word, I think. Because you're not painting. If you're painting. Well, I think it probably does apply to modern miniature figures, or World War II miniature figures, or whatever. There's always a point where things really come together and start looking a lot more exciting than they did. I mean, just that. We've now got. I think the wings really made him come alive a lot more when we got those done. And again now I think just getting these pale coloured horns and things on them has made all of that come up. That's a good example of not putting paint on when it hasn't dried. Just pulled it around. That'll work now. Let's just try it a little bit different on this bit, just to illustrate that I'd overloaded that a little bit. In fact, it's not dry properly. But you can that yellowing or the sepia colour against the green does work a treat.
Yeah, it does. Rather
than just the beige on its own.
So over the breaking, let it all dry?
Say again?
Oh, over the breaking, let the horns all dry?
Yeah. I'll just go in quickly with the super duper white again. Or not the white, the off-white. And again, if you look at him, he's got the arch of the wing going over his head, so if I can get the strongest white at the top edge. And even leave it a bit darker on the underside. There we go. That will do.
Very nice.
There you go. So don't have to take very long, but yeah, it's really coming together now.
Brilliant.
There we go. Okay.
What's after the break then? What's the next bit?
Well, I think I'd want to get the gloves done before, because we've got these leather gloves, which have got a component. They're kind of fingerless mitts.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because we've got, actually, he's got fingernails visible here, which I haven't done yet. Because I kind of want to do the gloves first, and the gloves have got a metal. So we'll have probably a silver bits round here holding a bit of leather here and a bit of leather in here. How you interpret this thing, it's either going to be, I don't know, what do people think actually. My initial reaction was to do that all metallics. So probably a silvery dark metal colour in the middle with some goldy bronze colours or brass colour around the outside. So it'll be darker in the middle, or metal in there, and goldy brass either side, with some metal holding a metal ring holding the leather bits together. Yeah, that's what we're going to try and do.
All right, we'll be back in a bit.
Okay, no. Righty ho, welcome back after that break. We now are going to paint some leather work. We were talking about gloves, so what I'm going to try and do is, or these fingerless mitts or whatever it is that he's wearing, I'm going to try and get those painted. You can see there's some creases in them, so at least there's some kind of form there to paint and work on, and do the bit at it's kind of held together by a round metal ring, so there's a bit of leather at the top, leather of a glove, so that's what we're going to try and do with this. So let's see what we can do. So already on the palette from before, I've got the black brown, and I'm going to use some, interestingly enough, for the leather, some red leather. I'm kind of doing this on the fly. I haven't really thought too much about it, so this is some creative painting. So I'm going to mix some red leather and the black brown to make a darker red leather effectively as a starting point. So this is just purely to paint, get some paint on in those bits and pieces so we can see, because at the moment it's only ever been black, so I don't really know, haven't really worked out where we're going to take it. The shape and form, I can see it will make, sometimes when you get paint on it, it will make sense. It was a bit of a weird thing because I can see his fingers coming out. So the first thing I just want to get done here is get some paint on it. I haven't done it particularly thin. It's probably thicker than you might normally expect. It's an interesting shape.
I bet you're glad you took the axe off.
I am, yeah. I've got, here we go. And I've got the axe ready to go when we get to that, which will probably be next week, I think. But that was I think I had a good bit of fortune the way I managed to get that to work for my purposes, because obviously I can get to this hand bit here. It's very weird the way the upper surface of this is going to be tricky, so I'm going to carefully get the paint on. It's quite tricky to see the top, because that paint is that leather is has got the ring passing through it. So you're going to have to make it convincing, get the bit of leather going across the top of it. Let's go. Now, arguably, the underside isn't so critical because it's on the underside, and when you're looking at it, you're not going to really see much of it. But it's nice to get it done as best you can. Yeah, that's one hand done. And as I maintain all the time is getting a good, the first most important part of any of this figure painting anything, is if you can get a good base coat on it, you can leave it at that and be happy with it, kind of thing. The bit after that is when you start adding the shadows and creating shapes and worn effects or whatever it might be. So I guess making that with the horns, just getting that beige on initially, that would be perfectly all right, just to get a convincing horn. It's going to pull out, that's better. That would be better for, adding the bells and whistles of the darker bottom to make it interesting. What we got. That's the embellishment bit. Getting the beige on is the first port of call. So again, here I'm going to try and get the upper edge with some paint on it, because it will be framed by the it'll be framed by the metal ring holding it all together.
What kind of colour are you going to do the metal ring?
I think I'm just going to do it nice and silver, but what we're going to try and do with these metallics is I'm not going to try and do it non-metallic metal. I'm going to use the metallics in the box we got.
Oh yeah,
because we have got some. I've got them out, but I'm not going to do it simple in terms of I'm going to use silver. I'm going to kind of try and do some in the way that I create. I like to create highlights and shadows. I'm going to try and do the same with the metallics, using the paints we've got, but mixing some of the other colours in. So mixing some blacks and some blues potentially in to make our very limited metallic palette a little bit more interesting and versatile.
You ever do any research on these fingerless gloves linked to a armband?
No, I haven't. I'm just going to try and paint these as leather. So so that's. I'm now going to add more of the black brown and thin that quite a bit more. Just buy some more recently. Just a reminder, useful thing. I keep forgetting to do it because it's as useful as it is. You sometimes just get into painting and you forget. But a bit of art paper. This is from Hobby Craft. I got a A4 piece and cut it into 6, so they form nice little squares pretty much. And I find it useful to because when I talk about thinning the paint, I don't thin the paint to a point where I say it's a ratio of this to this. I kind of do it and then test paint on the card rather than on my model, and it's often the same as painting on a black undercoat, which is why this is black. You could buy grey paper if you painted it grey primer, and you can see how translucent your paint is. You can see that's quite thin still. Just move it slightly up and out of the way a bit. So it just gives you a feeling of how thin your paint is, and we've demonstrated on previous sessions on that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my slightly thinner dark paint just to go, and you can see there are some creases in this glove.
Yep.
And I'm painting on the lower edge of those creases only with this thinned darker black, and I'm going to be a bit more extravagant on the underside of his knuckles because that's all effectively in shadow. Yes, I think you probably could if you primed it black. Absolutely fine as well. Yeah, you could equally. Question was the dry brush palette. Could you use that for testing it? Yes, you could spray it with your primer and test. Yeah, it's a pretty good way of doing it, actually. It's a different way of using these. You could do it on a bit of plastic card as well, or any base kind of color, or any alternative to the model. An alternative to the model, I think, would probably be a good way of describing that approach. Of testing the thickness of it. So I think it's not that obvious, but you can just about see that darker tone.
Yeah.
In those shadows, I can go make an even darker version of that using just the pure brown black. Bring it down, and I can do between those knuckles on the underside, or between. He's only got 3 fingers. I've just realised.
How do you highlight something that's in shadow? Because obviously those knuckles will be in shadow, facing away from the light.
I won't. I will leave anything that you might consider a highlight there as in pure shadow. So just a second. I'm just going to realised why I'm struggling. My phone has got a dirty screen, and all I'm getting is glare. So I can't even see what I'm painting on the screen properly. So now hopefully I can see that better now, which will be better because I can see what you're seeing. There you go. Okay, right. Yeah, I wouldn't. That underside there wouldn't have any highlight on it at all from me. There might be a hint of the original base color underneath. I can then try and repeat that using that mid-tone there. So these are all on the underside of the those creases, and I can see a lovely big mold line. No, I didn't remove. Great, but that actually coincides with the edge of the glove, so I'm not going to cry about it. Now, with a leather thing like this, you remember we were doing kind of a crisscrossy leather effects on the skirt. We can do obviously similar effects on here eventually. I'm going to do a little line of that shadow on, there you go, just on that underside of that bit of leather. I'll go back round to the other one, try and do that again. Might do just a little bit underneath what will become the metallic bit.
Oh.
Now going to go to
distinction between the two leathers as well. That's good.
Yeah, leather is one of those things where there is so much variation in colours and variation on leather. And that is definitely, I mean, I haven't done any research on this, but just looking at different types of leather that exists out there, age of leather, the way it's produced, how old it is. Some of it might be cracked. All things you can attempt to put into your model. Do a little line around that side as well. Still want to separate it from the green flesh. Might go back with some darker black, green or blacker. Add some black to it to separate it out a bit more. Right, so at the moment that is a base colour and a shadow, and haven't gone super crazy on the shadow. Not quite sure what I'm going to do for the highlight, but I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this Parasite brown to add to the... Oh, actually, no. First thing I'm going to do, I haven't used... So that was the base colour, which was red leather and brown black, and we've gone different darker shades to almost brown black again. So now I'm going to do... It's not pure red leather. It's going to use a little bit of that original base colour. And it's going to be thinnish again. Now I'm going to do... I'm just testing it, how thin I can get lines with this brush. I'm going to do... on this upper edge.
Like a hem or something, or is that a highlight?
This is a highlight. So we've got the light coming down here. And so that top edge of the glove is catching the light, as is the tops of those creases. So that's what I'm going to attempt to capture. I'm still probably going to go back and add some more distressed effect. Now, if you remember how I was describing using the I'm not going in necessarily with the super tip of my brush. I'm going with that edge. So I'm using the edge of the brush to catch the ridge of the glove on that upper edge. You probably refer back to an older video to really to understand what, because it's a difficult shape to describe here. There was a better example somewhere else. But I'm using this just to go, and I'm painting out towards the edge again. So you can see that's got a bit of now the red leather tone on the upper portion of that glove, and on the tops of those creases a little bit more. Do it on the other side. Right. That's probably a little bit brighter than the other side, but to illustrate the point. That's cool, that one. I think this dries a bit darker than it goes on. There we go.
So when you are you going to put another highlight using the same red leather as well?
But I might add another colour in just to try and make it a little bit more distressed.
Uh-huh.
I haven't quite decided what that colour's going to be just yet. But again, I'm thinking about where the light's coming down and catching. So that is all this highlight is coming on to all this lighter colour is on the upper portions that are catching the light. It's a bit, this is one of those things where when I'm looking at it in the flesh round the camera, it's a little bit redder and brighter than what you're seeing on the screen. It's the camera is kind of losing some of the intensity of the colour a little bit. So the brush strokes I'm putting on here, I guess it's like some of the little dots I did on the bone. Some of these are a little bit more than just trying to do smooth blends. I'm quite happy to have kind of a little flicks and lines because it will look like a distressed leather a bit more. It can be a bit more. Let me just see if I were to do this. Hang on. So you can see where that's gone on when I zoom in like that. And there's, I haven't put any under there. It's all on the upper portions. Does it look like on the other side? Arguably, one side is a little bit more in the shadow than the other.
So, like the distressed effect you did on the skirt, is that what you're going to do on the gloves as well?
Yeah, something not dissimilar to that, I think. Is
random lines and scratches.
Yeah, so not everything has to be perfectly super smooth highlights and shadows and blends and everything. You can use little dots and things and lines to try and create. I mean, it's actually got a big scratch across in the moulding there. And you can try to replicate that. It's actually quite nice.
What does the box art suggest these are? Does it say leather?
I think it is, yeah. Oh. Well, it's just kind of a blacky grey thing. So, right, what I'm going to try. Yeah, I'm going to try and use this Parasite Brown.
What a name.
Yes, they're all great names. So, put a bit of that on. And I'm going to just mix a tiny bit of that in with the red leather. In theory, that I can see how that's a lighter colour. Since I can partially use it to go and do some lights at the very top kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because we've got that area which is right where the light is catching, but we can also do some little scrapey lines kind of thing, just with the very tip of the brush, lightest strokes possible. If we don't make a stroke by doing that, it doesn't matter. You can always just keep going back and forth until something does come off the brush. Ooh, even in different directions. And I think probably arguably
When you're doing those highlights, Rob, are you still trying to let it pull where you want the more paint to be on the end of your brush stroke?
I'm probably using a lot of this now. I'm using the tip of my brush a bit more because I'm trying to do little line effects as opposed to. I'm still for a lot of this kind of painting towards the edge. So if that did happen, if I paint isn't quite so thin with some of this, but yeah, I'm kind of where have we gone? I'm going from center to out, to out is the way I'm approaching this, or center to top, depending on the lights, the highlight kind of thing. I'll just go a bit more parasite brown in there.
Is it still the same brush as you were using?
Yeah, it's still the multi-purpose. Not a bad brush. This. Yeah, because some of the other stuff I've painted in other weeks, I've used some posh brushes. But this is kind of just illustrating that you can. There are all sorts of brushes you can use. Still don't like the other two, but these ones are pretty cool. This one's pretty cool. I like this.
We were talking the other day. We were talking about the technique that you have, and you really only just touch the brush into the water when you do that. I mean, you can't see the water today, but usually you can see in the corner. You just kind of tap it in.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
So I'll do that, right?
Yeah.
If I'm getting paint off a brush, but I don't dry it out. So I've got if I'm little things. I guess these are, aren't they? And I'll just that's taking the excess water out of a brush.
Yeah.
But it's still wet.
Yes.
It's not dripping, but it's still wet. So So can we demonstrate that? How wet is that? It's that wet. You can see there is still moisture in it. And I could happily mix that back into any one of these colours and bring that paint to life a bit more and go back in. So I'll dip the paint in the water, take the excess off and pick up my paint. If I want to thin the paint a lot, I might dip it in like that and really thin it kind of thing. But it's
interesting because I don't think we really saw you washing the actual brush in the jar, or at least you did it quietly.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing as well is that when I guess this is brush preservation as well, is that when you're drying the brush or taking that water off, you can see I'm holding it almost parallel to the tissue, which isn't scrunched up, it's folded, and I'm just kind of pulling the brush in the direction, in the way you would paint as well. So again, you're not forcing those bristles in any other direction other than what they are supposed to, expecting to go in, kind of thing. So you are treating the brush almost with respect, as it were, even when cleaning it. So I'm just going to get, I've got some, and here I was just thinking, I almost did this automatically, but it's the little things, isn't it, really? I'm dipping just the very tip of my brush in, and I'm just going to my brown black, and thinning the paint slightly, so it's you probably end up with 50-50 without even realizing it. I'm just going to go back and put some of that in the deeper shadow portions. I'll probably even go back and add some. I probably don't even need to do much more of that. Right, I'm now. How are we doing for time?
I've got another 15 minutes or so.
Okay. So what I'm going to do now is go for the. We're going to try that one. Yeah. No, not that one. I've lost it. Why have I lost it? It's over here. Yeah. I don't know what you guys have found. The black in this tub I found is a little bit glossy. It's got a sheen to it, which makes sense because I've had some people give praise to, if this is the Vallejo model color as is straight from their model color range, has a little sheen to it, which some people quite like. And I do, and I don't. I can't really say it's at times you don't want it to be that glossy. I mean, I think to illustrate the point, you can see, I think I put some black paint over the end of the belt buckle thing, or the bit hanging down. That's got a bit of a sheen to it.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is just test out this black pudding.
I wonder how long it would be before you got the black pudding in.
Yeah. And my one comment about black pudding is when I did my little colour thing, you can see there's a slight blue, arguably some blue tinge to it.
Okay.
Put them next to each other.
Yeah.
But for the purpose of most of this, that's not really important, but it was just an observation. Making it probably more of a lamp black. I think if we were going to go and talk classic colours, move it up there. You can even see that a little bit on the palette when it thins.
Yeah. Blue black.
It's that was quite intriguing. So I don't know how matte it will end up looking, but I'm just going to carefully pick out what will become the metal bar.
So I've heard that if you put black gloss underneath metalwork, won't it show up well? Is there a reason why you didn't want the gloss underneath?
You
heard that before?
I am aware of it. I think people might do it for alkyd metallics and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how relevant it will be for a figure or at this scale. I don't know if there's enough surface area for it to make an effect on. As long as it's, for me, as long as it's dark, you can see how that black pudding is quite grey in some respects.
It certainly doesn't look like what I would know as black pudding, or the right colour.
Yeah, I might go and I can see that in the water there. I'm going to get the black out and mix some black with black pudding. Uh,
I would have thought black pudding would be almost like reddish black. What do I know?
This is great because it's a proper learning process along the way.
It's culinary.
Yeah. So, right, well, yeah. So, what I tend to do as well in these situations is, as I'm going, is paint bits to, although I'm not painting the handle, it is good to put a bit of paint on it, black, just to sharpen the edge where it goes and joins that leather, and his skin on his finger. And hopefully, again, this is going to be tricky, folks. This the metal ring, because what we're going to want to end up doing is you're going to want some of that black that you're putting down as the base coat, effectively, like I did with the horns, is still to have that edge in there. So with regard to that ring, the metallic, which will be in my case silver, will only pick up on the raised portion of it and leave a dark outline. That is my intention. Now, what I'm also going to try and do, if I can, is I'm trying to paint it just so it goes up into that bit of leather, so that it almost looks like the ring will disappear into the leather. So I'm kind of doing even though there is no moulding of that black going, or the ring going into the leather there, I push that paint up a little bit so it looks like it's going to go into it. Hopefully that will become, and try and do it on the other side.
We've had some insight into black pudding.
Okay.
From the audience. Black pudding, this is Mel J. A black pudding are in the ooze family, along with gelatinous cubes and the like. So think pudding like custards.
Oh.
It's the American pudding.
So it's an American nomenclature.
Yeah. So.
Of
desserts. That's some fine brushwork there, Rob.
Yeah, like I say, it will brushwork. I mean, this is one where you need thin enough paint, but not overloaded on your brush. Because if it's overloaded, and it's too thin, it will run and go everywhere. And you just want it to go on that little circular bit. So this is literally just carefully touching. And again, hopefully as well, there's a bit of I've had a bit of green paint flow on the inside there, you can see. So that's the kind of a weird wash effect I'm not quite so keen on, because it's not quite natural shadow kind of thing. I'm also going to do this thin that slightly more.
You can go back and fix that, can't you? With a
bit
of dark. Yeah.
But I'm also going to, just with this black now, is carefully from above going down, it's just outline I outline and separate that black glove, or the top of the edge of the glove. You can see I've done it to the left. And I'll do it in here. And now I'm going to do it on that side. So it's a bit, outlining. It separates the glove from the green skin a little bit more.
Yeah.
Do the same. What I can do here as well, while I've got some paint. I'm gonna just, you can see some green has gone onto the bracelet, so I can just whack some black paint over that to separate those bits off. That's kind of in preparation for doing some metallics on it later.
Do you think you'll get time to do the metallics today?
I think we could possibly try on the metal ring bit, at least, because I think metallics are in an area of their own in some respects, because for me, my rules of thumb are, if you can, don't use the same brushes as you use for your regular painting. The reason being, and also I don't use a wet palette with my metallics. I'm going to use a different type of palette. The reason being is I basically do not want the metallic pigments cropping up anywhere, or brush water, but I'll probably forget about that. Thank you, RJ. I tend to forget about that. I have good intentions, but I do forget about it. Yeah, basically those little metallic, or the pigment that makes it metallic, can suddenly appear where you don't want it to be, and that can be a pain. So for years I would have used the same brushes and stuff, but when it suddenly dawns on you and you do get some metallics where you don't want them, you do very quickly go, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to change my work method. So partially that is, part of that is not using, or like I tend to do a lot of the time now, is not use metallics at all and use non-metallic metals. If I can, if it's on a small enough area. But I think we can try and do something, just to start getting the feel of these metallics when they come in.
Yeah.
So
the last few minutes or so.
Yeah. So for me and metallics, in terms of brush water, this is the last thing I'm going to do tonight, so I can use this because I will change it before I go back to doing anything else.
Why would you need to change it? What's the issue with having metallics?
Well, you're going to end up with metallic. If as soon as I clean my metallic paint off a brush in that water will end up with lots of metallic pigment in it. And if I then go and use that water to thin anything on here, that will get pigment in it, metallic pigment, and you'll get little flicks and flakes of silver and all that kind of jazz. Where you don't, I don't want bits of silver to suddenly crop up on his flesh, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the logic behind it. It's right down to the water. So
that's the same with your brush and your wet palette as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have yeah, it could get in. Even though you might have cleaned your brush really well, it might be in the right up high in the brush hair, close to in the ferrule bit, and you use it another day, and it will work itself loose and end up where you don't want it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, depending on how many tablets you take, you may well have various pill cases and the like of various forms, from your paracetamol tablets to, if you had one I quite like these because these are really shallow and I can't remember what they were, but they're something I've taken over the years, and that becomes the kind of palette I use when I'm doing metallics. So we had two silvers supplied to us, so I think there's a brass came with that one. So yeah, so there's the silver and the brass, and so given getting stuff out of these is a real pain, I'm going to use that for this now. And years ago, I'm going to change my brushes. I wrapped some gaffer tape around the tips of my metallic painting brushes. So I'm going to get my metallic brushes out.
Do you think there's an argument to say that the metallic pigment would damage the bristles over time, or have you not noticed the difference?
I don't know. I really don't know. Given the amount of metallics you do, they probably last twice as long anyway, because you probably don't paint quite so much in metallics as you would other colours. So I guess you could argue the jury might be out on that one. I don't know. Right, so I tend to, there you go. Bit of silver just in one of those. I'm going to put one in next to it again.
I don't think we've even ever watched you do metallics before.
No, I'm kind of nervous right now.
Me too.
So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this. Let me just remember, I've still got some black pudding. So I'm going to put some black pudding in the thing next to it, and I'm going to add some of the silver to the black pudding to make a darker silver. And you can actually see how blue that is now, which is great for a fantasy figure. Can
we have a look at that black card up close? See how that looks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that black pudding is surprisingly blue, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm tending for this initial coat or this initial pass. It's not particularly thin, but it is probably more fractionally thinner. Just going to do the old nail test. Now I'm going to do this very carefully, and funnily enough, I think you'll find that this here although it's blue, you can't even perceive that it's blue when it's on the figure, just when it's against other colours. So because I tend to work quite subtly, I didn't want that silver to be jumping in your face, so that's why I've added this darker colour to it.
The first time you introduced any blue to the figure at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Is this the colour you perhaps could use in the axe to match it
Yeah,
up?
my intention was always to, when we get to the axe, on the blade itself, the handle will be quite, will be all the brasses and all coppers and things, but the blade will be blues and have blues in it, and
Okay.
I was intending to do scratches on top of that again, and use in the same way you do scratches on here, and do lighter edges to them. You can do the same with a metallic, so you can do a darker base and then do little black lines on it where it's got scratched, and then little silver highlights on top of those to pick up so that same kind of effect. So that's subtle. It's metallic. It's not in your face metallic, which is kind of what I wanted. I quite like that.
Yeah.
We are.
Kind of like a blue steel or something.
Yeah, but like when you're actually looking at it, you don't spot it being very blue on the figure itself. It seems blue in the palette kind of thing. But that's because it's such a teeny tiny area that we're doing.
Could you put a blue glaze on one side, just push it a bit, do you think? Or
you could do that if you wanted.
Oh, you have got blue in the wings, haven't you, as well?
Oh yeah, hints of it. Yeah. Good cook. I forgot about that. Yeah, I think for such a small area as these little rings holding the glove together, I don't think I'd go that far for those because they are such small areas. I might try maybe glaze it. Well, we'll definitely be doing glazes elsewhere later on when we get to the axe, etc. And that colour will end up being used on the rims of these bracelets.
Okay. Yep.
So this was just a trial. That's quite nice, isn't it? Actually, that's just catches the light enough. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to just use some of the pure silver, and I'm going to be cocky, and I'm going to just do a little bit at the top
as a highlight.
As a highlight, yeah.
Oh, can't see it.
Sorry. So yeah, just at the top. So this is kind of, even though they're metallics and you kind of use the metallics this is the sort of thing you'd only really see in the flesh properly. But it's just illustrating how you can still do light effects on metallics. There we go. That'll do.
Yeah, this is quite good. I like that.
Yeah, so it's got the black outlining still from putting a careful base down. It's let's see if I can get that a little bit. There we go. I just want to push that up slightly higher into the.
This will have to be the last part now.
Yeah.
Talk about what we're going to do next week or week after. Is it 1 week? 2 weeks?
2 weeks now, I think.
2 weeks, okay.
Go into December.
He's going to have a snowy ground. Festive.
It'll be a raging fire below him.
Yeah.
So that's it. Basically, that's a gentle introduction to my approach to metallics, and you can see then you get the idea that that's quite nice, isn't it? Really, how those amulets, stroke bracelets will go. So they'll have a kind of a brass center with this same similar ring edging, but some highlights in there as well to make them a little bit more interesting than just a continuous colour.
Will they be sort of scratched up like the leather is?
I don't know. Possibly not, because I think he's going to have a magical element to him on those. They might be super duper fancy things that give him a +5 ring of protection or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you do.
I don't even play the game, so I don't know. What do I know?
You clearly do.
Well, I've read that somewhere. These things like a +5 saving throw.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah,
a 3d10. I don't know, something like that. That sounds right, doesn't it?
Okay.
But yeah, so you can see as we're going now, though, we are now getting little details coming in that give him a little bit more character, a little bit more life, a bit more interest, and that's where we'll go. So the next goal is, let's do full-on metallics next time. Even doing some of the handle and stuff. Have I missed anything? So we're done. Yeah, so the leather will be done. If you stop and think about what we've done on the other leather components, you can quite easily add some of that to the glove bits, or just leave them as they are. There are also, don't forget and they're pretty tricky to see, but there are the fingernails in a hand that you can pick out as well, but I haven't done them yet. In the same way we did the horns. There's still lots of little bits and pieces. You start getting to those little finicky, little annoying bits.
Yes. So next week will be metallics, and then I guess the week after will be the base.
Yeah. Hopefully, what I might do between now and next week is just sharpen up some of those spikes and horns again. A little bit more sharpness to them.
Okay.
Without the camera staring at me. But yeah, metallics next week. Maybe even the axe head itself. It can go quite quickly doing that. And then the base. Yeah. So
brilliant. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome. Glad we've made good progress again. It's coming along. He's looking good.
What did you call him? Was it Nicholas the Nycaloth? Was it Nycaloth?
No, Nycaloth.
Nycaloth. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Okay, folks. Thank you.